And now we continue with our coverage of the death of Israeli leader Yitzhak Rabin. Judy Woodruff joins us from Washington. Judy?
Thank you, Brian. We're joined in New York now by Howard Barbanel. He is president of Likud USA. This is a sister organization to the Israeli opposition party, the Likud, in Israel. Mr. Barbanel, we thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Good morning.
This was a shock, of course, not only because of the assassination, but a shock because the Prime Minister was assassinated by another Israeli. Tell us about how hard it is, as someone who is a Jewish American, to comprehend that this could have happened.
Well, I'll tell you, murder and violence just have no place in the legitimate Zionist discourse, and it's absolutely repulsive. I'd say that American Jewish supporters of the Likud are mortified and disgusted, and send their sincere condolences to the Rabin family.
What does this mean for the peace process in the nation of Israel?
Well, hopefully this will provide an opportunity for Jews in Israel and around the world to come together to work towards a peace that will bring real security for Israel, and one that will enjoy broader grassroots support across the political spectrum. Unfortunately, right now, the country is extremely polarized. I would say that never in this century has world Jewry been as split on any given issue.
Well, we've been hearing about that extreme polarization this morning. Is this assassination, however, an opportunity to bring the two sides closer together?
I think the opportunity exists if there's a genuine reaching out from both sides. I don't think that there can be a call from any one side. There's a lot of blame to go around on both sides, and both sides need to make an honest and concerted effort to come together and find some sort of a modus vivendi. But clearly, part of what set this up was an atmosphere that was created by the former Prime Minister, in which he vociferously attacked his opponents, and of course his opponents felt, many of his opponents felt a need to respond. This was most unfortunate. I think we need to have a more civil level of discourse. I know that Likud leaders have been calling for that for some time. But we also need to have a situation where there is an overwhelming majority of support for major decisions that affect the Jewish people. Oslo II did not have that. The vote was 61-59. It was done on the strength of 5 Arab members of Knesset, so the vote did not have a Jewish majority.
Tell us exactly what vote you're referring to.
Well, the vote approving the Oslo II treaty was 61-59 with 120 seats in the Knesset. This was passed on the strength of 5 Arab parliamentarians, which means there was no Jewish majority or Zionist majority for the Oslo II treaty, which exacerbated the tensions in the country. In the United States, you need a 2/3 vote in the Senate to approve a treaty. The Israeli Knesset does not require that. But if you look at the treaty with Jordan, with 104 votes in favor, there was a clear national consensus in favor of that treaty. So I think what the Israeli government needs to do now, and I know that the opposition is willing to do that, is to try to come together and formulate something that will mean real peace and that will enjoy more broad-based support that everyone, or certainly at least the overwhelming majority of Israelis and Jews around the world, can live with, as opposed to one side shoving its agenda down the other's throat.
Are you saying that's what's been going on? You just said a moment ago that the atmosphere in which this assassination occurred was set up, you said, by the Prime Minister Rabin himself. Can you expand on that?
Well, unfortunately, the Prime Minister used every possible occasion, along with other members of the cabinet, to deliver vituperative and excoriating criticism of settlers, rabbis, the opposition, any opponent to the government. Never has there been, in our memory, a more undiplomatic and probably a more highly emotionally charged atmosphere, especially coming from the top echelons of government towards a huge segment of the Israeli populace. And this certainly created a very poisonous atmosphere in which one madman, as we can see, can take this sort of thing to an absurd level, and unfortunately this law student did.
So you're saying Prime Minister Rabin was in effect responsible for the fact that this, in part, for the fact that this happened himself?
No, what I'm saying is that he bore a great deal of responsibility, along with other members of the government, for creating a very, very divisive and emotionally charged atmosphere with deep divisions in the Jewish community, both in Israel and abroad. And hopefully the new government of Prime Minister Peres will be speaking in more diplomatic and conciliatory language towards the opposition. And certainly from the standpoint of the opposition, we've been calling for months for reconciliation, for dialogue, for rapprochement, and hopefully we're going to be able to get together and conduct this on a more civilized and respectful level.
Well, what are your realistic expectations for Mr. Peres? I mean, he's hardly been someone that your party has been a fan of. What are your expectations?
Well, it's highly probable that Mr. Peres is going to try to accelerate the peace process, given his past actions as a barometer. And I'm sure that he will also try to consolidate his grip on the prime ministership, which he was never elected to. And we could probably look for some very interesting internal Labor Party goings-on as we approach the elections in November.
And your expectation is what? That the Labor Party has the upper hand because of what's happened, or not?
Well, it's really a toss-up. You know, certainly labor leaders can wrap themselves in the cloak or the shroud of Mr. Rabin's ghost. But then on the other hand, Mr. Peres has never been able to win an election and is not as popular among the Israeli populace. Rabin was considered credible because of his military past, which Mr. Peres does not share. And with the Israeli public as divided as it is, I don't know whether this grief for Mr. Rabin will translate and hold for another 12 months to give Labor a victory at the polls.
It's been said by some, Mr. Barbanel, and once again we want to point out you're president of the Likud USA party, a sister organization of the Likud in Israel,
Correct.
that the Likud is not really interested in peace.
That's totally erroneous and facetious. We have a completely different connotation and conception of what constitutes real peace. There is no pro-war party in the Knesset. That's the kind of libel that was thrown at the opposition and that created this atmosphere. We, of course, initiated Camp David. We went to the Madrid conference. We voted and supported the Jordanian peace treaty wholeheartedly. We were the government that banned the Kahana-Kach movement from the Knesset. This is not true. We have a different interpretation of what is real peace and what the proper security arrangements should be and what the proper treaty clauses should be and who we should be negotiating with. But that does not mean that we are a pro-war party. That is the kind of thing that set up this atmosphere to begin with.
As you look at the reaction, Mr. Barbanel, of Arab leaders around the Middle East to this event, are you not struck by the fact that so many of them are sharing in Israel's grief? I mean, with the obvious exception of Libya and Iran, you have the head of the PLO, Egypt's leader, and so on and so forth, who are expressing outrage and grief.
Well, this is definitely a very constructive and positive sign. We do hope for peace with all our neighbors in the Middle East. And if there is a sea change of attitudes, not only on the part of Arab leaders, but more importantly on the part of their indigenous populations, then there is an environment for peace, and we all want peace. Every Zionist party, every Zionist movement wants peace. And there is always disagreement in a democracy as to how to best structure a treaty, how to best make a deal, and what those arrangements should be.
You talked a moment ago about what you expect to come from the Labor Party in the coming weeks, and you said you hope that the rhetoric will be toned down. What do you expect will be the role, and what do you expect the Likud Party leader, Mr. Netanyahu, will be saying, and what do you think he should be saying and doing?
Well, I know that on CNN last night he said in the most strong language that he personally and the Likud movement condemns this terrible, terrible incident. I know that the Likud is not interested in making political capital out of this horrible tragedy, and that the Likud will not oppose the formation of the new government by acting Prime Minister Peres, and that we would probably be looking forward to cooperating with the new government to bring about national healing and reconciliation.
All right. Well, Howard Barbanel, president of Likud USA, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.